Alright, so we're going to be doing a different kind of video today, and that is a movie review.
Turn off the flash, you fucking moron!
I'm not a film critic at all, whatsoever. I looked up some basic film knowledge just to get like a simple understanding of what I'm going to be talking about and to understand the language just a little bit. But I'm going to be reviewing Mid90s. A lot of you have been asking me to talk about this movie and what my thoughts are on it. I think this is interesting because I'm a skateboarder, not a film critic. So I'm not making this as a film critic. Also, I'm gonna give my thoughts on the movie at the end of this video, by the way, after I'm done breaking it down and assessing it. I'm gonna try my best to point out certain stuff about the film from a film aspect. I mean, I make videos on YouTube, but that's far different from a filmmaker. A Skateboarder reviews essentially one of the most hyped skateboarding movies ever, maybe? You had Kids in the 90s, which was really good. If you guys haven't seen that, go check that out. It was also very accurate, I think, skateboarding wise and of the times. It was made in the 90s. You have the movie Grind, which is a very corny and cheesy story about a skater who wants to go pro. And then you have Lords of Dogtown, which I thought was a good movie. I haven't seen it in a while, so just take that opinion at face value. Take all of these opinions at face value. I'm just giving you a skateboarder's perspective on this. Now, before we jump Now, before we jump face first into this movie, I want to talk about the unnecessary controversy surrounding the movie from skateboarders. There's other controversy as well, but we're going to talk about this one, and that is, does Jonah Hill even skate? Now, most of these people that are complaining, if you skateboard, then I'm sure you know people complaining about this idea here. Does Jonah Hill even skate? Jonah Hill's been involved in skateboarding. Well, I don't know involved. I'm just trying to find the right words here to convey this right so it doesn't come out sideways. He loves skateboarding. It's very obvious. A few years ago, he was in a Palace Reebok commercial.
What's up? I'm here in sunny London, and right now I'm doing what I always do when I'm here, rolling through the Palace store and just chilling.
Palace doesn't just throw anyone in like an edit in a commercial. I think they know what they're doing. I'm not giving Jonah Hill credit just because he was associated with Palace, but he knows his shit. In interviews, he talks about old videos, he's talking about Mouse, he's talking about video days.
So my favorite video part of all time is Keenan and Gino and Mouse.
And if you don't know what these videos are, maybe because it was before your time, those are pinnacle and iconic skate videos. So I don't want to even like go down that road, mostly because I just think it's a very childish and juvenile conversation. Like there's some kind of gatekeeper saying who can come into skateboarding and who can't. Like who cares? Who fucking cares? I could care less. It doesn't matter. I just want to get that out of the way. We're not going to be talking about whether Jonah Hill's allowed to make a skateboarding movie or not, because pointless conversation. I don't care. Especially people outside of skateboarding are not gonna give two shits. So I've broken this video down into 5 parts. First thing I want to talk about is right away the movie starts out. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want to know about the movie, then don't watch this video, watch it after you've seen the movie. Sonny gets thrown out of his brother's room. So I relate to that in the aspect of seeing it when I was a kid on TV shows. So right away I was like, oh, they're hitting the nostalgia like right off the head. That's the first scene, and then like the handful of first scenes is just like his brother leaves the house, he goes in his brother's room, there's a bunch of like weights on the ground, there's posters all over his room, he has all of his hats hanging up on the wall, which all of that to me was a very nostalgic 90s type thing. So like I picked up on that right away, whether consciously or subconsciously, and also he's looking through his CD shelf and he's seeing all of his CDs. So then Stevie sees these kids on the sidewalk, they're really cool, they're skateboarding, they look like they're having a good time. They tell like some dude on the sidewalk off, and Stevie sees that, and all the kids are like laughing, and Stevie's across the street, and he becomes attracted to that and wants to hang out with those kids. He goes into the skate shop where they all hang out. He's very scared, very nervous, and very intimidated. I really relate to all of that. Feeling that pressure, that peer pressure of like wanting the kids that you think are cool to like you and to accept you. But he's just trying to like mind his manners and get accepted by these kids. He does his first ollie, and it shows like a montage of him trying, him falling back down and getting back up, and that right there is so emotional for me being a skateboarder, like doing your first ollie and how amazing it was and how amazing it felt. You finally figured out how to pick up the skateboard without your hands and just your feet. That's like the big aha in skateboarding. There's a scene in the movie where everyone's scared to try to ollie this gap, and then Stevie tries it, although it is way fucking above his ability, and he eats shit and gets really hurt. So like, I relate to doing that kind of shit when I was a kid too, because I wanted the older kids to think I was cool and good at skateboarding, so I would try shit way outside of my level. And even if I got hurt, I didn't care because I was like, I tried it. These kids thought it was sick. That kind of whole mentality, I think, is a very 90s approach. I don't really know, because I'm not a kid now. So I don't know what it's like. It probably is still like that, but I heavily relate to that aspect of it. Stevie starts drinking, Stevie starts smoking and doing drugs and going to parties and hooking up with girls at a young age, which is what I did when I was a kid. So that was all hit super home with me, and you're kind of hanging out with kids that your parents don't necessarily approve of. There's a scene in the movie where Stevie's mom gets upset about the fact that he's hanging out with these new cool kids, and she's yelling at him, and then he's yelling back at his mom. I had a dysfunctional home life growing up as well, so like I really relate to that. You can tell that Jonah Hill did skate just by watching this movie, actually, because he depicts the whole growing up and skating and finding a group of kids, and then skating being like the bond, and then becoming a family, and then using skating to escape like real life problems and a dysfunctional home life. Yeah, it's emotional. It's emotional. And I think even for people outside of skateboarding, it's emotional too, because they can like just replace skateboarding with whatever they were into as a kid, or even if they weren't into anything as a kid, if you just grew up in the 90s, you can relate to this just simply by how raw the times were. And Jonah Hill does a really good job at showcasing you the truth, because there's a lot of controversy also around all of the homophobic slurs in the movie. And Jonah Hill, I saw him in an interview on The Breakfast Club talk about how he just wanted to showcase the truth, and he wasn't trying to imply anything with that. He's just showing you what it was actually like. And I respect that. I liked that, because I don't think he's trying to show kids that it's okay to say those homophobic slurs. He's just showing you the language that people used in the 90s, and it's very raw and it's very real. And that's exactly how it was. Also, skateboarding's in a very high place right now, I think, popularity-wise. It has been for the last few years. Also, the 90s are kind of back now. People are wearing baggier clothes, puffier shoes. That whole thing has kind of done its full cycle, and now it's cool again, just like back when I was a kid. The 70s and 80s were cool. The 70s are kind of cool too right now. So the movie was made in a perfect time. That's another reason why I think the movie will reach a bigger audience than just skateboarding. So you gotta take into account too that where skateboarding is at now, how skateboarding is very popular and accepted as like an athletic thing, and you have all these YouTubers who are family friendly and catering to kids in a much more friendly way than previously, because it's not such an outcast thing like it used to be. It's just more overall accepted as like a real athletic activity. Even when I grew up skateboarding in the early 2000s, I didn't start skating in the 90s. From the time I was born to 10 years old, I saw skateboarding on TV and in the video games, so I noticed that culture, and I could see how it was like raw, and these kids were outcasts, and these kids did drugs and they drank, and it was like very sex, drugs, rock and roll, party lifestyle. Skating in the 2000s was still very much, if not the same. It was just on a little bit bigger of a scale, because that's when Jackass got big, that's when BAM blew up, that's when like Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 was out by that time. And skateboarding was really gaining momentum in the mainstream, but it was still this like outcast, not fully accepted thing. You've always had contests and competitions, right? So it's always kind of been like the debate for sport versus art has always been there, but not to the level of like now where it's going to be in the Olympics in a year. So even today, I think kids can still relate to it. But in terms of, for me, from a skateboarder standpoint, the movie might have hit home a little bit more personally than somebody else who just enjoys films for films, or like somebody who's not a skateboarder. Okay, so let's go into the music. Now, First thing I noticed before the movie even started, when they were showing the titles, all of the music was composed by Trent Reznor. If you guys don't know who Trent Reznor is, he's 9 Inch Nails. He's a very big artist of the 90s. So like right away I was like, oh shit, he's a music composer for movies now. That's what he does. So I mean, I don't think that may have been intentional, may not have been intentional, but I connected the dots right away. I was like, oh, 9 Inch Nails, big in the 90s. Movie, mid-90s, skateboarding, etc. And just all of the hip hop that was used in the movie as well, like Tribe Called Quest, the last montage of the movie where they're using the fisheye, that song by the Far Side. That music really emulates that time. I wasn't really listening to a lot of hip hop, but I know that like a lot of those artists like Mobb Deep, Biggie, Tupac, Tribe Called Quest, those are all pinnacle 90s hip-hop artists. I mean, I'm not a hip-hop expert, but even I could pick up on that whole vibe of the movie. Then you have the clothes, all of the really baggy clothes. They're all wearing like girl and chocolate. The shots in the movie, like the colors of the movie, the way it's color corrected, it's all like, it all just looks super raw. The aspect ratio, it's like shot square. It's not widescreen or anything. So that automatically gives it a feel and a vibe right away. Okay, now my opinions on the movie is, my expectations were very high. I went into this movie with all of the hype super conscious, and I think that was the wrong approach to go into it, because I also didn't know the movie was going to be a character study as well. So there's no like, I mean, there is some emotional high points in the movie. I mean, there's a lot of them, but for me, I just, like, I knew it was a character study as soon as I started watching. I was like, oh, okay, it's this kind of movie. And I didn't know that. I don't know why I didn't put that together before I went into the movie. It's just trying to convey you like the way the characters are, their bond of like the crew, the way skateboarding has an effect on their life, and just the whole era. Like, I could see a lot of people complaining and saying like nothing happened in the movie. If you go into it with the expectations of like a Michael Bay film, yeah, you're probably gonna be let down, but it's not that. It's a study of like the era, the nostalgia of the characters, and how skateboarding was in that time, and just that whole time period in general. I also think like the acting was really good. And it's crazy because none of those kids are actors. All of those kids are just skateboarders. And I think the reason this movie has so much backing is, well, I mean, for me right away, I was like, oh, na-kel's in it? That's crazy. He skates for FA. You guys don't know what FA is? It's a fucking big brand. Huge, like one of the biggest skateboard brands right now next to Primitive. That gives it an immediate backing. I think FA and na-kel very high up on the popularity spectrum and coolness spectrum in skateboarding. Also too, with Jonah Hill's involvement in skateboarding, I think that gives it an immediate backing, because I mean, you see it everywhere. The Barracks did a first try, Fridays, Mid90s. Transworld has made a video with the cast of the Mid90s with what they do on their YouTube channel. And I think it's like really cool how the industry kind of just backed it right away. There wasn't this like gatekeeper mentality about it. So I mean, I thought that was pretty cool. So it's been a couple days since I've seen the movie, because at first I was like, it was all right. But the more I really think about it and the more I talk about it with other people, it was good. I liked it. It's not like necessarily one of my favorite movies, and I think that, again, that's just because I had my expectations way too high, but it's a really good movie. Not my favorite, but great movie. I'm not gonna give it like a number review or anything, mostly because I feel like that would be insulting to real movie critics. This is just a skateboarder's perspective on the movie itself. I also think they did a really good job at showcasing the whole feeling and the idea of being skaters in a time when skating wasn't necessarily at its peak, and you were still considered an outcast to be a skateboarder, and then like hopping fences to skate spots. I mean, you still do that to this day, but being so harsh towards security and being a kid and feeling like it's you and skateboarding against the world. And since you're a kid and you're a juvenile, you have this like teenage angst, so you're not afraid to like tell a security guard or a police officer to fuck off. And then I'm not condoning that kind of behavior. I'm just simply saying like how I relate to that and how he did a very good job at depicting that. And it was like great execution. All in all, like I said, it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. Those are my thoughts. Those are my opinions. Let me know what you think in the comments below. We'll talk about it. I like talking about this kind of shit. I enjoy conversation, so I will be responding. Please leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. If you did not enjoy it, please also leave a like. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video.